So I wanted to take a little bit of time just to kind of introduce myself and to try to discuss some of my background. Hopefully, that what you'll be learning in this course, you'll get to know me a little bit better and understand where some of my philosophies are coming from. I started probably just a lot like you. I didn't really necessarily have a ton of talent, but I had an enormous amount of work ethic. Uh, and I knew there were athletes that I was competing against in the marathon and in the middle distance races as well. When I first started getting started in the sport of distance running and middle distance running initially, I started running in 1992. My brother kind of talked me into coming out for the track team and didn't know anything about distance running. He was throwing shot put and discus, and he asked me, he's like, "Hey, come out for the track team." And I'm like, what am I going to run? He's like, run the mile and the 2 mile. You're scrawny, So I started running the mile and the 2 mile when I was a freshman in high school in 1992. Finished the year. First time I ever ran the mile, I ran it in 5:30, and then I ran the 2 mile in 11:30. Never would have ever dreamt years down the line that I would become a marathon runner, but my personal best my freshman year at the end of the year was 5 minutes and 9 seconds and 11 minutes and 30 seconds for the 2 mile. So nothing out of the ordinary, nothing, really showing that I had, a capability down the line to, run a 2:19 marathon or, to make two world armed forces cross country teams. Some of the things I've done, it's just been based on the fact that I spent years just continually, working toward getting better as an athlete. Um, so yeah, I finished with 5:09, 11:30 my freshman year. Sophomore year in high school, went from finished the year with a 4:38 mile and a 10:36 2 mile. Junior year, I went dropped my mile down to 4:32 and my 2 mile down to 9:46. My senior year, kind of stayed stagnant for the 2 mile. Ran another 9:46, but I did lower my mile down to 4:25. Went on to college. My brother and I both went to Malone University in Canton, Ohio, where I was coached by Jack Hazen. We both were coached by Jack. Jack's one of the world's best distance running coaches, as I'll be covering some of what he's taught me in this course too, and some of the specifics that some of the strategies he's taught me that I really think is really going to make a big difference in your training, in your mindset, and in your preparation leading into this your upcoming marathon in the next few weeks. Um, Went on to Malone University. Didn't really run anything spectacular. Nothing. Like I said, I'm not the fastest guy, fastest athlete out there. I just continued training hard. In college, I ran 15:19 for 5,000 on the track, 8:45 for the 3,000 meters indoors. What else? I ran 1:13:32 in my debut half marathon. I was training to compete in the NAIA national championships in the marathon, but ended up never really running the marathon. I knew how difficult that 1:13 felt, and I felt like, man, for me to medal, I really need to run sub 2:30, and I just knew I wasn't at that point in my career that early. Wasn't ready to run that fast, but I was happy that I did finish my half in 1:13 in Chicago. So um, yeah, I just continued to train. Graduated from Malone in 2000, and I had finished with a Bachelor of Arts degree in physical education. And in 2000, when I graduated, there really wasn't any um, lucrative positions that were available at that time in that area in Canton. Malone University is in Canton, Ohio. So I come from a military family. My dad's retired Army, and I have numerous other relatives that were either in the Air Force, Navy, or Marine, or Navy, Air Force, and Army. So considered going into the military, and basically signed up 2 months after 9/11, and finished up and signed the papers in November of 2001. And here it is, 2020, January 2020 at the time of this video, and I've been in the Army on active duty for over 18 years now, and I am due to retire in November of 2021 unless I get promoted. So yeah, it's been a great opportunity to be an athlete and serve as a soldier athlete in the Army. But the reason why I'm making this particular course, and I've made them in my other courses as well, is because I really need to teach uh, you what is the specifics, what are the exact strategies you need to follow in order to get the best results with less effort. I mean, because we train so hard, we know how to work hard, but some of the best trained, hardest working athletes I've ever met in my life never broke 230. So I know to get you to a point where you're under that barrier, it's going to take knowing the right things to do and definitely focusing on what are the things you do not want to do. Um, so in terms of my background, yeah, I enlisted into the Army in November 2001. My first assignment was in Fort Carson, Colorado, in Colorado Springs. Fort Carson sits at about 6,000 feet elevation, so uh, I knew that the Army World Class Athlete Program is headquartered at Fort Carson, and I was fortunate to be assigned there for my first unit or my first assignment. I continued to train, continued to compete. Um, I did. I showed some potential in high school. I mean, I did run a 425 mile and a 946 2 mile, but it's all about persistence, consistency. I was able to, I ran a 24:32 8K in cross country when I was in college. Like I mentioned before, 15:19 5,000 meter on the track, and to this day, I've never broken 15 minutes for 5K. So hopefully that's encouragement to you to see that, hey, if this guy ran a 107:06 half marathon and a 2:19 marathon, and he's never broken 15 minutes, then maybe that gives me some hope too. If you don't have the overall leg speed that I didn't have either, not for that particular distance really, then hopefully that'll encourage you. I was able to lower my mile down to 4:22, so an additional 3 miles when I was in college as well. Um, Ran 4 flat for the 1500, so I always felt like I was stronger for the longer I went. But even looking at it back now, I never really thought that I was ever going to run the marathon. When I was in 2002, I was called. The sports director of the Army World Class Athlete Program had given me a call and asked me if I wanted to be on a Armed Forces uh, marathon team that was competing in New York City, and it was for charity. But what we were supposed to do was uh, start the race in dead last, which was 32,189th place. We weren't allowed to start the race until every runner had crossed the start line. And for every runner that we passed, um, Chase Manhattan Bank was donating $1 to lung cancer research. So I thought it was a great opportunity. It was a week in New York City. They put us up in the Plaza Hotel, which if you know anything about the great hotels in New York City, the Plaza is one of the best. They picked us up in a limousine at the airport, and I was on a team with some great military runners. One of the guys was a sub 4 minute miler. Can't remember his name right at this time, but I know he ran 3:56 or 3:57 for the mile. Um, it was a great time. We ended up in uh, starting the race after everybody had finished, and I was able to finish as the team's top finisher. Went from 32,189th place to 253rd place by the finish of the race. Ran 2 hours 43 minutes 36 seconds, and probably spent the first 10 miles just trying bobbing and weaving around people to try to get away. I do remember the first mile. I ran the first mile in 16 minutes flat, so it gives you an idea, how uh, slow it was at the start. Um, so that was my introduction into marathon running. I didn't know anything about it. Had never run a marathon at that time. In 2002, my personal best for 10 miles was 53:21. I've since been able to lower it to 50:54, and that was my 10. That was a split actually. my 10-mile split in the half marathon, in my half marathon PR, when I ran 107.06 at the 2007 Philadelphia Rock and Roll Half Marathon. And my best open 10-mile race was 51:29 at the Cherry Blossom 10-miler in Washington, D.C., and I did that in 2007. That was actually my first race for the Army World Class Athlete Program, and I got smoked. I think if you look up the results, I think I was 24th place in that race. And I think the guy that won it ran like 46 minutes and 40 seconds, somewhere around there. It was in 46 range. But I just continued to train, continued to learn, just like you. I was reading everything I could find. Um, I knew I had to get better at that marathon distance if I was ever going to be a member of the Army World Class Athlete Program, because I knew I didn't have the leg speed for a 5K or 10K, and I knew, the 5,000 and 10,000 is one of the Olympic sports. If you go to armywcap.com, you'll see on their website that what the standards are now, which I think now the marathon you need at least a 2:15 flat. Um, Back in 2007 or 2002, when I first got to Fort Carson, the standards were 2 hours and 22 minutes flat or faster. To just that was the bare minimum to be a part of that unit. So I continued to train. It took me from 2002 to 2007 to finally PR in the marathon. I had to, and what I'll be discussing here is some of the reasons why it took a long time to get that race down. One of the biggest reasons why I was able to improve is because I was running my long runs far too slow. I was getting a little bit too caught up in mileage and not focusing on quality. I was really kind of hammering higher mileage, thinking that that was the answer. And that's not the answer. I can assure you, I've learned my lesson. I was not hydrating well in preparing for my marathons. I was not drinking nearly as much as I needed to be in the marathons leading up to 2007. I made a World Armed Forces cross-country team in 2005. It was in Tunis, Tunisia, in Africa. And then the following year, in 2006, I made the 2006 Armed Forces World Cross Country Team that competed in Thun, Switzerland. And those two races really taught me a lot about if you want to make it to the next level, you're going to have to take your licks and goof it up sometimes in your races and in training, and learn and take your hits. I know the fact that you're already either a 250s marathoner, 240s, or 230s type athlete right now. You already know this. I mean, you're already highly disciplined, highly skilled, and accomplished already as an athlete. But to make this jump to sub 230, you're going to have to really step it up in terms of your mindset, how you're setting up your training. And I hope this course, what I'll be discussing in future videos here, I hope it'll really. I hope some of the techniques you'll learn. I know some of it's going to be some things you already know about, but I hope you'll be learning some specific tactics that you hadn't really considered in the past. Maybe you have, but you haven't really initiated enough on it. So, yeah, I mean, I hope these future videos are going to help you out. Went to my first marathon for the Army World Class Athlete Program was the 2007 Grandma's Marathon, and big learning lesson there. I did PR, ran 2:40:02, but the problem is I went out in 1:10:32 at the half. I was still at 2:28 marathon pace at mile 18, and I crashed and burned basically the last 10K of the race. I was walking and jogging pretty much to the finish line, and when I first got to the Army World Class Athlete Program, I was assigned Lisa Rainsberger as my coach. Lisa won the 1985 Boston Marathon Championship. She was the last American female to win the Boston Marathon prior to Desiree Linden. I think Des won it in 2018 or 17. But Lisa's viewpoint was get away from quality. Get away from quantity and volume, and really start focusing in on quality. I mean, we knew once I got to the World Class Athlete Program that I was at that time in 2007 when I was conditionally accepted into the unit. I was actually stationed in Europe, in Belgium at the time, and I got a call, an email actually, that there was a conditional program where they were letting um, promising soldier athletes that didn't have an Olympic trial standard or a national ranking come to the unit to be a part of the unit and to be given 1 year training full time. All the responsibilities of working a full time job in the military was taken off me. And within 10 months of being in that unit, I was able to drop my marathon from 2:43:36 to 2:19:35. And I actually uh, ran the 2:19 while I was working full time because uh, Grandma's was my first marathon, or my first marathon for the Army WCAP program. And because I had a decent first half. Actually, I ran a PR for the half marathon in the first half of that race. Uh, but we took a couple days off. I started training for the Chicago 2007 Chicago Marathon. Um, Went into Philadelphia. I think it was Philadelphia was in September. Ran a huge big PR in the half marathon and 10 miles. I ran 107.06. Like I said previously, I hit the 10-mile mark in 50:54 in that race. So I knew I was ready. I knew I was capable of breaking 222 if I got everything correct. I knew my leg speed was coming along. I was doing mile repeats in Colorado Springs at altitude at 6,400 feet at Cheyenne Mountain High School, which is where the team now trains. And I was doing 6 by a mile at an average of 446 to 448. I had done 3 by 2 miles uh, leading into the Chicago Marathon in sub 10. It was actually a 950, 952, and a 10:02 that I did um, just a few weeks prior to the 2007 Chicago Marathon. One thing about me, I'm not a hot weather runner. I'm a cold weather runner. So Chicago was in 2007. It was the worst heat in the history of the Chicago Marathon. And if it would have been my decision on that particular day, I probably would have not have run the race. Um, but the Army had flown me out to Chicago, so I knew I had to finish. I hit the half at 111 and change. I think it was like 111:13 or 111:14, and I was having a rough day. It was a bad day. Ended up running 2:51:55. So if you can imagine what the last 15 miles of that race were like, it was absolutely awful. I was walking most of it and jogging, and I knew I just had to finish. So uh, took a few days off and started training for the 2007 California National Marathon, which was in December. So of all the races I would have ever believed that I would have broken 220, it would not have been at Sim. Sim is a net downhill course, but it's sort of like Boston's actually even more of a net downhill course. But anybody that's run in at the California International Marathon will tell you it is nothing but rolling. There's rolling hills and there's some downhill sections, but then it goes up and up. Um, I ran in Columbus. I've run Chicago. Those were the courses where I thought I would, run my fastest races at, but it just happened to be there. Um, and so I ran 2:19:35. I finished as the top American in that race. I was still at 5:11 mile pace through 20 miles. We hit at 1 hour 44 minutes and 5 seconds. And a lot of that time I was leading the race. I was with a group of Kenyans that were way better than me. Um, there was a Russian that was in the race that was running with us. He finished behind me in 2:23. There was a Canadian that I was running with as well. His name was Charles Bedley. He ended up finishing third in 2:16. And the two Kenyans that trying to think, John Kathoga finished second in like 2:14:53, and Laban Moibin, who's I think his PR is around 2:08. He ran 2:14, like 2:14:50. So those top three guys that beat me uh, broke me at around mile 22. I was leading the race as well as them. We were changing up paces and stuff. Um, but yeah, that was my big breakthrough race. I knew I was ready. I knew I had done the work, and that's how I broke the 220 barrier and the 230 barrier at the same day. Um, so that day actually I earned the Olympic trials, the 2008 Olympic trials standard, 28 days after the 2008 Olympic trials were held, because the Olympic trials were held in New York City in November of 2007, and I ran that on December 4th, 2007. So it was kind of like qualifying for the Olympic trials, finishing as the top American, winning $1,000 for fourth, breaking 220. So it was a big day for me. Um, you know, I'm not saying any of this to brag or because I mean, I've had successes and failures in this sport. I just want to tell you my story so you understand, you know, who I am, who's coaching you, who's mentoring you here, who you invested your hard-earned income for in this course. It's really important that I just tell you, be blunt with you and tell you that hey, I didn't always perform at the highest level. I had setbacks just like you and anybody else. Um, I just continued to train hard, and I believed in what I was doing, and it turned out okay. Uh, Went back. I ran the 1935, which qualified me to come back to the world class athlete program. I went after the 2008 Olympic trials were over. I stayed on staff, um, and actually after the Chicago Marathon, which was in October of 2007, that was my last shot to get the Olympic trial standard because of the trials being the following month. So for me personally, I knew I had to continue to train and get to a point where I could break that 222 barrier, and that was still my goal. I was coming off of that 107 half in Philadelphia. I knew I was ready to do it. So Lisa and I continued to train hard. I was doing the track workouts, the exact same training that I'm going to be teaching you in this course, um, and then flew to Sacramento and broke 220. Uh, so because I did that, I was able to come back. I stayed on staff as a staff member, but after the Olympic trials were over in November, I was working full time. So I was no longer on athlete status. So I had to humble myself, just like anybody else, and get back to work. And so I was training and working, and then went out to Sacramento and broke that 220 barrier. So if you're working a full time job right now and you're stressed out, I can tell you you can still do it. You can still break 230. You just got to believe in yourself, and you really have to buckle down and time manage. And there's no shortcuts with this. So you're going after an elite time, very 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 aggressive pace for over 26.2 miles. I commend you for doing it. I know what it's like, and I know how difficult it's going to be. But I believe if you follow what you're going to be learning in this course, you're going to set yourself up for success. You're going to have a much better chance of getting under that 230 barrier as long as you're putting in the work and you're coachable and you're listening to what I'm covering here. And I know you will. So uh, after the Olympic trials were over, like I said, I went back to the World Class Athlete Program, stayed on as a staff member for about 8 months, and went to Army Officer Candidate School. I was enlisted for about 6 years. Went on to Army Officer Candidate School at Fort Benning, and then because I broke 220, fortunately for me, I was able to come back to the World Class Athlete Program and train for the 2012 Olympic trials. Uh, the problem was they again only gave me a year, so uh, I wasn't able to run under 219 flat, which was the new standard for qualifying for the Olympic trials leading into the 2012 trials. And the fastest I ran was 236. And again, um, it's very, very difficult to um, duplicate a marathon as fast as a sub 220. I mean, you already know yourself how difficult even 230 is, okay? Trying to break 220 and do it again and actually break 219 or run 219 flat. For me, I was like, what's another 35 seconds, but I learned my lesson well that, I trained for over a decade after running that time and never ran faster. So the fastest I ran since the 219.35 was in 2011. I ran 226.42 at the 2011 Monumental Indianapolis Marathon, where I took fifth place. And that was when I was with the 101st Airborne Division when I was stationed at Fort Campbell, which was my following assignment after the Army World Class Athlete Program. I continued to train I can assure you that the hardest I've ever trained in my life was leading into the monumental Indianapolis Marathon. I branched my long run out to 30 miles. And I did that 30-mile run at 6:06 mile pace over hills in Kentucky. I mean, I was in good shape. Um, and the 2:26:42, I had to jump in a portage on. I probably lost while I was running with the leaders, right around mile 16 or 17. And I know I lost a good, probably about 2 or 3 minutes on that stop, and then spent the rest of the time trying to chase the guys I was with. So I ended up placing fifth place, but I was running with the leaders in that race. So that was a huge breakthrough again for me. I still credit that. I still think that 2:26 I ran in Indianapolis was even more um, impressive, at least to me, based on where I was at in the military, than the 2:19 I ran in Sacramento. So uh, continue to run. Now I kind of watch my nephew now. His name's Brock Pennington. Definitely look him up. He's in Pennsylvania. Only a junior in high school right now, but really impressive already. He ran a 4:42 miles a sophomore last year, a 2:01 800, and a 10:06 2 mile. So he's going to be much faster than his uncle, I can assure you. Um, in the years to come. So that's kind of my story. I mean, my brother got me involved. Like I said, he was a shot put and discus thrower, um, and never in my wildest dreams would I have thought that I would have gone the places I've gone and done the things I've done, met the people I've met, if it wasn't for having that encouragement of somebody that cared about me and that said, hey, why don't you come out for the track team? So I credit my brother for talking me into getting involved in the sport. So that's my story. I recently retired from competing, so now I'm creating content on RunDreamAchieve.com. I created this course, or I created this course obviously just recently, but um, I've had the website since 2011. So I've been writing on the site for about a little over 8 years now. Started this channel. I started the RunDreamAchieve.com YouTube channel in January of 2019. So it hasn't been that long, at least from the time of this making this video right now. So it's only been a year, but I've really enjoyed that and helping athletes around the world get to the next level in their preparation, in their marathons, and their 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons. Um, but that's kind of where my background is. I hope you've enjoyed at least hearing my story. At least now you kind of know where I'm coming from. You know my background, and I hope that what you're going to be learning in this course will change, maybe bypass some of the mistakes that you've been making in the past, and will help you get to a point now where you know exactly what you need to do. You'll be learning some tactics, some strategies that you probably haven't heard of. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. Um, and I'll also be covering some tips and strategies that I've learned from some of the world's top distance running coaches and marathoners. I've had definitely a great fortune opportunity as well to be around athletes that were far better than me, that pushed me to my limits and took me to a place that um, you know they pushed me so hard in training that I was ready to run under 2:30. I was ready to go under 2:22 at that time. So because I believed in what I was doing, visualizing success and putting in the heavy work, I got to a point where I broke the 2:30 barrier and did it twice, and broke the 2:20 barrier. So with that, and again, it's not, this is definitely not to brag or anything, because I've had more failures, I think, than successes. But those failures taught me what I needed to do to get to a point where I could personally break 2:30. So I know where you're dealing with. I know the struggles, and I know what you're going to be doing, and I know it's hard work, but you've uh, invested in your personal development, and I respect that. And I'm going to do everything I can in this course to help you break that 2:30 barrier. I want to see you finish cross the finish line in 2:29:59 or faster. That's the goal. So let's get started. And again, I appreciate you taking the time to allow me to coach you, and hope you enjoy the course.